Johnny Somali, aka Ramzi Khalid Ismail, was absolutely crushed today in court, and we have massive consequences as the FAFO hits. We're going to get into that today on The Legal Mindset. We teach you to be your own judge. I'm Andrew Esquire, American attorney over here in Asia, and this is a Fast Facts video, the quick and dirty version of the latest in legal news. And of course, we've been following the Johnny Somali trial from the beginning and giving you the real narrative, the real facts, the real consequences on what's going down in Korea for Johnny Somali. And we are at the end here. We indeed had a massive hearing today that actually had a little bit of a twist, which we'll get into and get into the details here. So today's hearing we thought was just going to be involving modifying the indictments, potentially either, modifying the deepfakes, adding charges, maybe doing something else like that. But what they threw in was they added in closing arguments. Typically that is done on a different day, but they allowed those closing arguments to proceed today. So we actually have an update on Johnny Somali's closing argument and his whole spiel, his last attempt to make his defense, which failed miserably. We had the Somali conviction team present there, taking notes, taking transcripts, so we have very good details there. There was no Hank in the courtroom. This is the second time that Hank has not been there in the courtroom with Ramzi Khalid Ismail. Johnny Somali, aka Ramzi Khalid Ismail, RKI, made a very bad argument in terms of his closing argument that was poorly received. Everybody in the court was shocked by the fact that he was making these statements and going this angle with his closing argument. And even the judge had a visible bad reaction to what he was doing. The prosecution also gave the recommended punishment, and it is way worse than most people would have expected, and actually has some real consequences for him, even in the United States. So we're going to talk about that as well. So let's jump right into it. Guys, in case you don't know, Ramzi Khalid Ismail is facing 8 different charges. That's 4 obstruction of business, 2 minor offenses acts, and 2 deep fakes. Now, he'd been trying to get rid of this deep fake with Youngman and also the one with Bongbong, trying to kind of knock both of those things off, because that's stuff that carries serious prison time, and that's the thing where you can't wiggle out with a fine. And because of that, he's already guilty on all these other counts. He already pled guilty to all these accounts, but he was fighting these 2. He was really banking on today being a day where they drop those deep fakes, because these deep fakes, once again, have mandatory prison time, mandatory recommendations, and he's got 2 of them on his count. They had this motion to modify the indictment, and they filed this days ago. I kept that under wraps because I wanted to see where this went and how this played out. Obviously, if there was a modification, we wanted to be able to explain it. So today we found out during the hearing what that was. RKI was hoping this was going to be the deepfakes dropped. They were going to get rid of the Youngman deepfake because he had a quote-unquote unofficial settlement with Youngman. But mind you, in the Korean system, the prosecutors have all of the authority as to whether or not a charge is dropped, what they do with the charge. So even if you receive a settlement with a victim saying, hey, or somebody else, the other party there, because these people, Youngman and RKI, both showed the deepfake, and the deepfake was of Youngman and Hank making out naked. Very definitely fits the deepfake statute just to a T. But the prosecution did not drop the charges. In fact, they did not even mitigate the charge. All they did was update a table of contents and update dates and times of some of the crimes, including some of the deepfakes. They updated those to be correct. So all they did was issue corrections to dates and times. So this is a massive, massive loss for RKI, as his whole case was banking on getting rid of these deepfakes. So let's jump into his closing argument. What did he say? And this is the words of Johnny Somali, aka Ramzi Khalid Ismail. I'm going to break it down and then we're going to do some analysis. So Ramzi said, "I sincerely apologize for my actions in Korea. I express remorse for the incident for which I was charged. I have been held captive here in Korea for a year and a half, during which time I committed no crimes." That, by the way, I'm going to step out there. That's very debatable, as he's got other pending stuff being investigated that's criminal activity he would potentially committed. Anyways, he says I learned to integrate into society during that time. I did some foolish things under the influence of alcohol, and I realized the consequences. I sincerely apologize for this. Having been born and raised in the United States, I did not realize how serious the consequences of the actions were, which would not be considered criminal in the US and could be in Korea. I'm going to pause there. This statement and this framing, being sorry, not for what you really did, but sorry for the consequences. This is very similar to when he said, I'm sorry this offends your honor in his previous apology about the comfort woman statute. It's not actually his actions he feels remorseful for, but the fact that there are consequences for his actions. Let's continue. I reached an agreement with Lee Jong-chuk, that's Youngman, regarding the 2 deepfakes. That's actually false. He only received a settlement regarding one. The other was with Bong Bong. He doesn't have a settlement with her. And he no longer seeks punishment. Bong Bong made it clear in court that she was unaware distributing deepfake videos was a crime and initially viewed them as not sexual content, but funny images. If she, a Korean, did not recognize the same act as a crime, how could he, an American, have known it was? When I asked Bong Bong whether he had defendant's counsel consent to distribute the videos, Bong Bong said no. The law is unfair. Since the police didn't do anything when I tried to report Bong Bong, all I'm asking is for the law to be applied fairly. I want to appeal to the prosecution and police. It's unfair if Bong Bong and I receive different punishments. I'm still young. I want to see my family and go home. Please show leniency. So that is all of his arguments. So essentially, once again, in closing, Ramzi Khalid Ismail is arguing that his ignorance of Korean culture led him to attack shopkeepers, that it's okay in America to throw ramen at people, to curse, to disrupt business. Actually, no, it's not. A lot of those things would also be criminal in the United States, RKI, right? A lot of those behaviors, even in the US, wouldn't be okay. But trying to say that's Korean culture. The judge did not like that at all. He also claimed that Youngman doesn't want punishment, but it doesn't matter that Youngman doesn't want punishment. It's up to the prosecutors to determine whether to bring that forward or not. And last, he attacked Bong Bong. You see how much he focused on this is unfair. Well, this argument, as I've said from the beginning of this case, is a loser in any country when it comes to criminal defense. You cannot say I should be innocent because you didn't charge this other person who did the same thing. It's the speeding analogy. Hey, you didn't give that guy a speeding ticket, therefore you can't give me a speeding ticket. It simply doesn't work anywhere on earth, and him trying to use this here was always a loser strategy, and the fact that he played it out is actually full comedy. And once again, saying he's only really sorry for these consequences of his actions, right? And no knowledge. Ignorance of the law is not a defense, particularly in this case when he was on a spree. Continuing, the judge visibly reacted and gave side eye. This is something that was perceived by the Somali conviction court. The judge is normally very serious, very straight-laced, no nonsense, but he had an actual physical reaction when RKI tried to blame ignorance of Korean culture. And when he started to attack Bong Bong and imply that she should be punished, that did not go well with anybody in the room. The prosecutors, the judge, they were not having any of that, not entertained by that. This argument that the law is unfair and the police didn't do anything about Bong Bong and that they received different punishments, that did not work at all. No one in the court thought that apology was sincere, and nobody was buying that argument. So what did the prosecution drop? Well, they dropped their sentencing recommendation, and it is insane. The prosecution suggested 3 years in prison with labor. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, labor. A fine of 150,000 Korean won, which is the maximum. If they could give more, they probably would give more. And sex offender registration. That is a bombshell. One of the biggest bombshells today is sex offender registration. The court is very likely to adopt the prosecution's recommendation or only give a little bit below. So 2 to 3 years, very reasonable to say. They recommended 3, maybe they give 2. Very reasonable to predict that. The fine, registration, that's the very, very likely ruling that's going to come up during sentencing, which will be the next hearing. His 2 smartphones are also forfeited. He is not going to get those back. And as part of being a registered sex offender, his labor will only be with other prisoners, right? So likely he is going to get factory labor job or prison toilets because he is not going to be allowed as a sex offender in Korea to interact with normal people. And that is probably the best for normal human beings in Korea to not have to interact with Ramsey Clit Ismail, Johnny Somali. So cabbage picking, unfortunately, I know we have our lovely cabbage plushie here coming soon, but cabbage picking may be too good for him because that would actually involve him working with other people. They're also required to make a public disclosure, let everybody know about his sex offender status, and also put him on a mandatory sex offender treatment. So that's all part of the recommendation there. So also, as a registered Korean sex offender, RKI, and this is the U.S. law where I come in, may be required to register as a U.S. sex offender under federal law, SORNA. Now, this is interesting because convictions under the laws of any foreign country require you to register as long as that conviction was fair and had due process. South Korea meets this standard. He went through a lot of due process. This is considered fair by U.S. law. So South Korea is considered a fair country. It's not North Korea. It's not some sort of, other country like Cuba or something like that that's going to have unfair political laws, etc. Because South Korea would meet that standard. So he's required to register upon 3 days of entering the U.S. So he must register in any U.S. jurisdiction where he resides, works, or attends school. Failure to register in the U.S. can carry a 10-year jail sentence. So that is waiting for him after he gets out of jail in South Korea. Massive W. The next trial date and sentencing is set for April 15, 2026. And now this is very funny. The judge asked him, hey, do you want to be sentenced quickly? And Johnny Somali said, yes, I would like to be sentenced quickly. And essentially ignored his wish in a little FU to Somali, ignored that and normal procedure, which is setting the sentencing 2 weeks after closing arguments. These were closing arguments. 2 weeks after would be early March or mid-March. No, we're going to put it in April 15. So they set it for 2 months instead. So even on the way out, it looks bad for Johnny Somali. This is a total loss for Cabbage Boy. I want to know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next.